Hi, welcome to this Grandma's Life podcast. I'm your host, theciaellis. Get ready to laugh, learn, and grow with me as we explore growing old in a never changing world. Today is November 15, 2023, and this is episode 50. This episode is one of the special editions. This is part of the series of the next Great Depression, and this particular one is named "How Much Do You Really Eat?" And I want before I even get started on this, I want you to understand that I probably am going to have left things off. That you will think of some things on your own. I never want you to think anything in these series as fear mongering of any sort. I just want you to have information so that you can make your own decisions on what's best for you and for your family. Like I said, this is part of the Are You Ready for the Next Great Depression series. This will go on my This Grandma's Life YouTube channel. This will also go on the Grandma's Homestead YouTube channel. I'm going to do some more editing on it before I put it on that, along with this recorded podcast. With each segment, I will also include small bits of history of the Great Depression of the 30s. Since this one is about food, I did a little research on how difficult it was for people to find food, both in the cities and in rural areas like Oklahoma that was hit hard with the Dust Bowl. I found a timeline that I will share with you. Excuse me. In 1930 to 33, there were the bread lines and soup lines too. But in 1931, they had food riots in the cities, and in 1931, 95 people in New York City reported to have starved to death, and I will go into that a little bit more in a moment. In 1939, they came up with the food stamp plan. Conversely, though, in 1930, General Mills introduces birds-eyed frosted foods, and this is because a lot of people didn't have freezers and refrigerators back in the 30s, but they had ice boxes essentially. So this is like pre-frozen food era. The Toll House cookie recipe was developed. Twinkies were created in 1930. In 1931, excuse me, General Mills develops Bisquick. In 1932, Elmer Doolin creates Fritos. In 1933, J.L. Rosefield produces Skippy peanut butter. In 1934, Nabisco introduces the Ritz cracker. I don't know what's going on with my stuff today. In 1937, Kraft macaroni and cheese was introduced, and so was Hormel. So Hormel introduces Spam. What an interesting show that you might watch. I don't watch television much, but I have watched a couple of episodes of this. I think it's on the History Channel. It's called The Food That Built America, and it has covered a lot of the things that were developed during the Great Depression. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Okay, so food prices dropped dramatically during the Great Depression, and I was curious why. With that, because right now we're facing very high prices of food and everything being much more expensive than even what they're telling you on television. And so then I'm thinking, well, why were people starving if the prices had dramatically dropped? Well, for one thing, a lot of people had lost all they weren't able to buy it anyway because they had all lost their jobs and there was no money to be had. But the reason the prices had dropped so dramatically was that during World War I, the government vigorously encouraged farmers to expand their crops and livestock production to feed the army and the U.S. allies in Europe. So after the war, the demand decreased, but the farmers continued to produce. So now there's too much surplus and no one to eat it and no one with any money to buy it, and the prices plummeted. The farmers could not make a profit on their crops, so therefore they couldn't pay their mortgages and other bills. And combine that with the Great Dust Bowl, where a lot of crops after that even failed. And that was from farming practices, essentially. Many farmers abandoned their farms, and many of those farmers moved to California. Those that stayed, though, ate odd things for nourishment, and it really was weird to me, like canned tumbleweeds. And most of you guys don't even know what a tumbleweed is, but if you go in West Texas and Arizona and all those places, they're weeds that blow across the field or across the highway as you're driving down the road, and they took portions of them and actually canned them to eat them. Popcorn with milk a type of cereal is what they made it. Carrot marmalade, so they couldn't get fruits and stuff. They made marmalade out of them. Dandelion salad. Now, some of you guys, even to this day, eat dandelion salad. Jackrabbit. They would kill and eat jackrabbit. Now, when they found berries and other fruits, they pickled them to save them for the winter too. Cornmeal mush and bean soup were a pretty main staple, though. And so it sounded to me like people have food, even if it was not conventional food that we would eat. So I was wondering how many people actually died of starvation. And I was not exactly able to find hard numbers on that from the Great Depression, but that even though there were cases of starvation, like was indicated in New York in 1931, I discovered that more people actually suffered from malnourishment. And malnourishment means that there was, because of their strange diet, they were not getting different nutrients that they needed. So, like with a diet lacking in red meat, poultry, fish, and brown rice, and more on foods like cornmeal mush, many people developed a condition called pellagra. And pellagra is a systemic disease that's caused by the deficiency of iron, excuse me, niacin. Symptoms included sensitivity to the sun, diarrhea, dementia, and even possible death. These food strangeness and shortages of stuff reminded me of a story that Jack Spirko has spoken of a few times on his podcast, the Survival Podcast. And he talks about when he was a kid, he had found some rat traps in the shed that had holes drilled into them. And when Jack had asked his grandfather the reason for the holes, he was told that the rat traps were screwed to keep two trees to catch squirrels. And he asked, well, did it work? He goes, yes, for about 2 years until the squirrels were gone. And I have to admit, that story has always stuck with me. You know, there are things that we can do for a while, but then after that's gone, what do you do? And that's a significant reason on why I chose to become a homesteader. As a mother and grandmother, food for my family has always been of utmost importance to me. When I was a single mother, I often tried to plan ahead to make sure that the money and or food lasted until the next payday. And so there were times when this didn't happen. Now, my boys never missed a meal, but there were times when I did. So let's think about how you plan for the prospect of another Great Depression food wise. Okay. So you could buy all the freeze dried foods that last for 25 years and store all the canned food you can eat, or start growing your own food, which I actually, honestly, I recommend a combination of all three. Okay. So, but I start with the pallets of freeze dried food. How much would you need? How many people will you be feeding? How many calories would you need for each person? Is the recommended number of calories enough to sustain you in stressful situations? Now let's consider canned food. How long will they last? How much do you need? How much do you need? How will you replenish this particular food when it's finally consumed or expires? Let's start with determining the amount of food that you need to consider stocking up on. Another thing that Jack Sparrow had said on his survival podcast was um, he has a method he teaches to determine how much food you and your family eats. He says that every time someone eats something, write it down on an ordinary paper tablet. If something is eaten again, put a tally mark next to it. Have your family members do the same thing. Do this for a determined amount of time, a week, 2 weeks, or a month. Calculate what was eaten and how much of it to determine your family's food needs. I believe that's a good idea, but as a mother and grandmother, I can assure you that there will be at least one family member that will not keep accurate records of what they've eaten, and your calculations will be way off. And at the same time, how much salt are you, and other spices and sauces and all that other stuff. Now I understand if things get really dire, some of that stuff you're not going to be concerned about, especially sauces and stuff. But salt, pepper, and some spices and herbs, you want to know how much you're going to need to have on hand. Um, so uh, then I just don't think that that would be an accurate way, and especially when you have to rely on someone else keeping the records. that you want to know about. You just know your calculations are way off, way off. So another way to determine your family's food needs is to look into your grocery list each week. In an era of ordering groceries and other items online, it's easier to determine your family's eating needs. Add in the food the working parent that eats out every day to this compilation. Not necessarily that they eat fries with a cheeseburger and large soda, but at least indicate the type of meal eaten. Basically, what you're trying to do is determine what it is that your family eats and how many specific can be specific calories. Some people count calories. I do not. I just want to know what it is that I need to know have on hand. And so now that you have a vague idea what your family consumes each week, let's say, take that information and calculate the amount of food you would want to have on hand for a longer period of time, such as a year. So now with this information, you can say, this is how much food I go through in 1 year, myself and my family. If you only want to have 3 months worth of food on hand, that's how you calculate it. You can expand this to however many years that you want to deal with. But now you have a better idea of how much food it will actually take to get your family through the period of time you want to be stocking up on food for, whether it's for a month or a year or 3 years. I believe that you'll find this amount of food, even just for a month, to be a little daunting. How in the world will you be able to store enough food for your family if needed? This is probably where people lean into the idea of pallets of freeze dried meals. That's great if you have the money to spend on it. In fact, if you live in a large city, this might be the route to take. At least a few weeks worth anyway. I'm not trying to say that there will be no food available, but you must consider that many things will not. Now this is the time to determine the possibilities available. These episodes are not to scare you, they are to make you aware. We have lived in an era of plenty and have become blind to the possibilities of lack. The shortages of 2020 should have opened our eyes. I fear this only made people wish for things to go back the way they were without any plans of preparation in case it ever happened again. I encourage you to take the expertise of determining the exercise of determining how much food your family needs, just so you can have a ballpark figure for you to have something to think on. Do that exercise, see, for a week, for 2 weeks, whatever it is that and decide how much food your family goes through, and that at least gives you a little bit of ballpark uh, idea. You can use Jack Spirko's method, you could use mine, or you can come up with your own version. It's up to you. Even a vague number will give you starting tools to secure the nutritional needs of your family. In my next episode in this series, we will cover the topic of prepping versus homesteading, and this is pretty much all I have for this one. Is I want you to start thinking about how much food does your family eat, and I guess another thing I want you to think about too is cook at home more. One way or another, because if we go into a Great Depression, restaurants are not necessarily going to be open. You're not going to have access to a lot of things you do. But if you do not know how to cook even the basics for your family is going to suffer even more. And you will find that the food that you cook at home, once you learn how to boil water, whatever, once you learn a little bit and learn to follow, and okay, so let's say you don't know how to cook, get recipe books, follow the recipe books to the best of your ability now while you have the food. And the reason I say that is because, okay, some people say, well, the recipe calls for parsley and I don't have parsley. I'm not saying to the letter, but what I'm telling you to do is read the recipes, follow them to the best of your ability with the measurements, as they say. Don't veer off of it too much until you actually learn what you're doing with food, and you won't end up with incredible messes. Okay, so learn to cook. You will find that the food that you cook at home, once you learn how to, is going to be far better than anything you get at restaurants and other places. And I think you'll find yourself much more pleased with the effort you put into it. And if it gets down to what you where you have to do this, at least you'll be prepared in that part of it too. Okay, so my income producing activity of the day is StreamYard. I would encourage each and every one of you to consider starting a podcast. Whatever it is that you're interested in, whatever that you like to talk about, whatever it is that makes you smile and want to talk about it, start a podcast. and go through StreamYard, use my link below, and get some discounts. It doesn't cost you any more, but it does help me a little bit with the production of this. And like I said, this is a different episode. I this like, but it is episode 50, so that means I've been kind of keeping at it. Maybe not on a regular basis because I mean, I work on things regularly, but they don't get produced regularly. Let me put it that way. So, but I'm enjoying doing podcasts. I've actually started another one. It hasn't hit iTunes and Stitcher yet, but I'm still enjoying doing the podcast. So therefore, I use StreamYard, and I really like them. I would appreciate if you give me a 5-star review, and maybe one of these days I'll learn how to talk so that so you can give me a 5-star review. But but at least make some sort of comment. That way I can be found by other people who listen to podcasts and to help me out there too. So where I can be found is on Grandma's Homestead. I post on it pretty regularly too, about once a week or so. I do a farm update, and I have some recipes on there, things that I have made and make regularly at home too, and there are other things I'm hoping to expand onto with it pretty soon too. But that's grandmashomestead.farm, and I'd appreciate that. Would be cool if you could check out my website there. My YouTube channel, Grandma's Homestead. Farm Animal Life is another YouTube channel. I just started another YouTube channel, and I'm not sure most of you will be interested in this one. This is called Kinsey Lackey Sports. I am taking snippets of what my granddaughter does in sports, and I'm making videos of them and putting them on that channel. So I can be found on Instagram is theciaellis, TikTok is or so okay, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, MeWe, Twitter, and Rumble, and under some version of Thecia Ellis, and that's TheCia Ellis, and you can find me there. So that's all I got for you today on this particular episode. It's a little bit short. It was kind of funny because by the time I did all the research and actually get it typed out and stuff, it took me a few days to even do that much. And then all of a sudden it narrows down to under 20 minutes. Oh, well, I gave you some information. Do the exercises, do what you can, and determine what you need for your family's needs. And the next time we will talk about about the pros and cons of prepping and or homesteading. All right, guys, God bless. I'll see you next time.